Hey everybody, welcome to week 8 of the fall 2028 week class. Congratulations, you have made it to the last week. I know that it has been a lot of work, especially in these crazy times, but the good news is you're getting the semester done in half the time. So congrats on that for those of you that are making it out. But I know you got this. You just got to finish strong, right? Stay focused and hang in there. So we have 2 modules left to work through. One of the modules is on pop and alternative. And so pop music, of course, is popular, whatever is sort of big in the name, the big names of the day. And this chapter that's coming up is an interesting one because this is where we really get to MTV. So MTV shows up on the scene August 1st, 1981. And so that's what you're going to learn about first, because that was a massive game changer for popular music. Now it wasn't just what did the songs sound like, it's what did they look like, right? What did the video look like? And there's pros and cons to that, because there were some pretty cool videos, there still are. But then it also makes you now see a song and then it becomes fixed. And so some folks aren't real keen on that. They want to use their imagination. So when we talk about pop, we're going to talk about some of the big names in the 80s. We're going to talk about Michael Jackson. You're going to learn about Michael Jackson, Prince, Madonna. Interesting thing about all 3 of them, they were all born in the same year, in 1958. And 2 of the 3 of those artists were actually popular before MTV showed up. Of course, Michael Jackson came from the Jackson 5, had his first solo album out in 1979, Off the Wall, and was already becoming a big name. When MTV came, it was like perfect timing. That was very much to where he was at, and he really pioneered the music video with things like Billie Jean and Beat It, and then of course what became known as a long form video, which is like a short movie with Thriller. And so while he was already famous, it just took him to a whole nother level, for good and for bad, because of course, his personal life suffered a lot because of that. And then we have Prince. Prince was the same way. Prince was a child prodigy. Prince was signed to the record label. His first record came out when he was 18. And he was already moving up. Controversy came out in 1981, really was hitting the scene out there, particularly in the dance music and the clubs before MTV. But then MTV came along, and then you had like Little Red Corvette, the video for that. And then and he put out an album almost every year of his entire career, except for 1983. And during that year, he was working on Purple Rain, the album and the movie. And of course, the videos and the film. And he ended up winning Grammys and American Music Awards and Academy Award and everything for that. Madonna is interesting because Madonna is a post-MTV creation, if you will, in that she really rose because of MTV. She was an okay singer, but she could dance and she had a look. And it was perfect timing for MTV. And, she knew how to use controversy in her way. So a lot of what you're seeing now or have seen in recent times, for example, Lady Gaga, really came from the Madonna playbook, which actually came from the Bette Midler playbook when she was young in the 70s, and it carries through. So what we're seeing now, when you see these artists that are out there, being very sexual and dressing very scantily and all that sort of stuff, Madonna was doing that. So that's something that's actually been going on for, 40 years, 50 years now. So it's just sort of a continuation of that. Sex sells. It always has, always will. And so we see that. Then you're going to learn about alternative rock. So alternative rock means, bands or artists that became popular not through the normal channels of the mainstream radio and all of that. Maybe some of them had some good connection and drive through MTV. And so some bands that are perfect for that would be U2, REM, and The Smiths. So you're going to learn about them. You're going to learn about hair metal. And hair metal was basically this combination of, the hard rock, heavy metal scene, and then it kind of combined with fashion, with, big hair and makeup. They took their lead from Kiss. They took their lead from the New York Dolls. And so that's where you get people like Poison and Motley Crue and Twisted Sister. And so you'll get those bands coming through. And then there was a whole scene that came out called New Romantic, which came primarily out of England. And it also was about fashion a lot. And dance music came out of the Blitz Club in London. And this is where you get folks like Spandau Ballet and Culture Club, Duran Duran. They all came out of this scene. And this really continued. You know, you learned about punk and new wave. This was the continuation of the new wave. The new wave just means literally that, those new things that are coming out. So you're going to learn about that. And then in the last chapter, in the last module, you're going to learn about alienated rock, and you're going to learn about return to roots rock. And so alienated rock was sort of, you know, where do you go when you have these bands that are going even farther to the edge, to rebel, to explore, to do whatever they need to do. So out of this is where you get, you know, goth rock with Bauhaus, and even The Cure was kind of connected into that in the early days. You're going to get, let me see what else. Oh, industrial music. So maybe you know Nine Inch Nails. You know, we listened to Johnny Cash's cover of Hurt, which is by Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor's group. And but maybe you don't know about bands like Cabaret Voltaire and Ministry and Einstürzende Neubauten. I will give you a heads up, Front 242. This music is pretty edgy, so it may not be your cup of tea. And then, of course, we also have thrash metal and speed metal, Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer. You get death metal. There were bands like Venom and Cancer and Mayhem. And I don't go into that a whole lot, neither does the book. Some of it, personally, for me, it just gets very dark. And it's not necessarily where I need my head to go, certainly not these days. But sometimes people don't necessarily fully appreciate the extremes that some will go. And then you have the return of roots rock. And music historians, rock music critics, you know, look back on music history, and we sort of look at, you know, the big trajectory. And what happens is, really, there's two bands, artists that are viewed in the big picture as really saving rock and roll. If you remember the disco scene that was coming up in the 70s and all of that. And that was the Ramones, who we've learned about, and then Bruce Springsteen. Bruce Springsteen took it back to sort of that bar band. He came out of New Jersey. He came out of that scene. He was very much influenced by Bob Dylan. He was influenced by the Wall of Sound, Phil Spector's sonic world. And he was is an amazing songwriter that really writes a lot about the average guy, the working class man and woman living in, you know, just living the average lives, trying to do what they do. And so I end there because I feel like it kind of takes us to this great redemption point. And, you know, as I've said in the past, not a lot has changed in the last, you know, maybe a few decades. It may seem like it has to those of you that haven't seen it. Hopefully you get a different perspective now. But really not much new has shown up in the last, you know, since what, 79, 80, something like that. Technology has changed. Of course, we went from MTV, we went to the CD, which came out in 83, we went to MP3s, we went to Napster, and now, of course, it's all really streaming based, which has completely changed the whole music business, and made it much harder for a lot of artists out there. And so, hopefully, through the course of this class, you've gotten to see the big picture of how history and music intertwines. That maybe you learned about certain things in the past. Maybe you learned about slavery. Maybe you learned about the Depression. Maybe you learned about World War I and World War II. Maybe you learned about the Civil Rights Movement, but you never really connected it in a meaningful way. But when we connect it with the music, when we think about those field hollers and those work songs and the early blues with country and classic and Delta blues, when we think about, you know, the songs of the 60s with the Temptations and Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, and the music that was coming out, and we connect that to the history, to the Civil Rights Movement, to the Vietnam War, to the things that were happening in the world, then it paints, I think, a deeper picture for us and gives us a broader understanding of the world at large. And so even when you look at the world now and you look at the music world, you know, think about what's going on societally and think about, you know, how does that connect? Why is this particular genre popular now and it wasn't before? And there's reasons for that. So think about those kind of things. The other thing I want you to think about is, you know, I don't really go much beyond the 80s, and that's a few reasons for that. One is we don't have enough time. We simply can't. I would be leaving out even more artists. And so we don't have the time to do that. I have this kind of cool idea that it would be to actually make this a 2-semester sequence where first semester went up to 1970 and then the second semester went from 70 on. But I don't think that'd happen here. But it would be at least a way that I could get us more current. Another reason that we don't get more current is because with the lens of you know, some hindsight, we can look at bands and artists that maybe we didn't think they were that important or popular at the time, but then you get a few decades down the line and you can see that they are. So a great example that would be Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin was not very much appreciated by the critics back in the day, and they weren't super popular early on. Now we can look back and go, wow, this was an incredible band that made incredible songs that really impacted the course of music. So the thing now is that if we look at the things in the last 5 or 10 years, we don't necessarily know who's going to pan out. Who are these people that we're going to be talking about in 5 years or 10 years? You know, there's some that we probably won't. I'm guessing we will not be talking about Katy Perry. We will not be talking about Drake. We probably won't be talking about Lady Gaga. Maybe we'll talk about Taylor Swift. Maybe we'll talk about Billie Eilish. You know, who knows, right? We'll probably be talking about Kanye. I'm not a huge fan personally, but he certainly keeps shaking things up in interesting ways. So we'll see. And even when this book gets revised from year to year, some of the artists that were in those last chapters, you know, a couple editions ago are gone because, hey, turns out they weren't that significant. They may be a great band, but they didn't really change the course of music history. So Coldplay is a more recent example of a band that's got great songs, but they didn't change anything. You know, they just sort of followed along. They weren't groundbreaking, and it's harder to be groundbreaking nowadays. I don't know how much ground there is to even break. And then the other thing is that there's an awareness. You all have an awareness of some of the more recent music, although that is getting a little bit different. I had a student a couple years ago that heard Nirvana and had no idea who they were. And if you think about it, Nirvana's Nevermind, with the album that Smells Like Teen Spirit is on, came out in 1991. So that album's almost 30 years old. Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses is 33 years old. So the Red Hot Chili Peppers is almost 4 decades old as a band. Some of you, when I asked you about, you know, punk and things like that, I always get students that reference Green Day and Blink-182. Those are old bands with old guys. They're not current by any stretch of the imagination. So just for fun, to see who's watching these things, and I'm kind of curious, I have a little, there's a twofold little thing for you to do. One, sometime when you have some time over the break, sit down and look at artists that have come out in the last 5 to 10 years. No more than that. Ideally, even more recent. Write down a list of 10 artists that you think we will be talking about in 10 or 20 years. Write them down, seal them in an envelope, and then put on the envelope, do not open until December 2030. I know it seems like forever, but it's 10 years. Open it up and see if we're talking about any of them. And then just give me one. Reply to this with one. I'm not doing an extra credit because there's some extra credit coming up at the end of the week. But I'm just curious. Who do you think we will be talking about in 10 years, in 20 years? Who will show up in the history books, right? It's kind of fun to think about, to see, well, who's actually having an impact? And be thankful, be critical. Don't sit down and go, well, my favorite is so-and-so, so I'm sure we'll be talking about them. Think about, have they actually impacted the music scene in any meaningful way? So you got the last week. You have 2 modules, which means 2 quizzes. You have your reflection and observation, and then you have test 3. Test 3 will open up on Thursday. Everything closes on Sunday. The class ends on Sunday night at 11:59. It is done by then. I got grades to get in and it is shut down. So please manage your time well. My recommendation is try to get everything in by Saturday so that you have Sunday as a buffer if you need it and so that you can enjoy it. There will be some extra credit opportunities in there. Take advantage of those. It also helps, we sort of report, hey, what have the students learned in here? You can't lose any points for the extra credit ones, but anything that you get right will get added to your total. Don't necessarily look at your total in Canvas when this is all done. Wait to see what I report in WebAdvisor. Okay, that's it. I hope you've had a great class. I know this has been a long video, but 8 weeks, you get longer videos from me. I've enjoyed teaching you. I hope that you've learned. I hope that your world of music has broadened and your view of the world at large has broadened, and that you come at it with a deeper sort of appreciation and understanding, and ultimately more compassion, right? We need that and more love more than anything else these days. So take good care, stay strong and healthy, and hope to talk to you again down the line. You will get the usual reminders, and who knows, maybe we'll run into each other one of these days. Take good care.